welcome to the fourth webinar of Internship Webinar Series. And today we have Anshu and Achuthan. Both are from MS17 batch, and they'll be talking about some interdisciplinary topics. And also Achuthan will be talking about on the how to find the correct internship guide for you. So first of all, Anshu, she worked in IISER Mohali, IIT Patna, RRI, PPISR, and she's currently working online in TU Dortmund. So she's mainly working on worked on improving precision of Michelson interferometer, and she's mainly interested in machine learning, quantum computation, and etc. So she'll be talking, sharing her experience in this field. And Achuthan, he previously worked in IISER, IISc, and they two in semester project in IISER. And basically, he works on protein biophysics and computational biology. So he's basically working both experimental and computational biology. So he'll be talking about the this how to find internship, and hopefully you will find it useful. So Anshu, start now.
Thanks, Vishal. So I'll be focusing on what to do when you don't get into an internship program. So, some of these points have already been mentioned in the previous talks, but I'm just gonna repeat them to form a cohesive summary. Now, first off, I'd like to point that these programs provide you with some unrivaled benefits and privileges. So you should definitely not miss any opportunity to apply for them. But that being said, only 5 to 10% of each batch gets to avail these scholarships. So you need to have an alternate plan of action, which is to mail the profs individually. Now, even this medium can offer you some very lucrative options. Stating an example, at Johns Hopkins, it's mandatory for any prof to provide every intern with a stipend of $2,000 per month, whether or not they get via a program. So, and that is more than what most of the US programs offer. Now, this entire thing is a very long and exhausting process, and I'd just like to discuss the various aspects briefly. First off, start early. October, November is a good time, and this is also the time you apply for programs, and it's not a good idea to wait for the results to come out before you start sending out, because by the time the results are declared in January or February, a lot of the labs are already full. Also, don't think of your profs at IISER as your last case scenarios, because as your last case scenarios in case you don't get to work outside, because they might very well reject you as well if you approach them later on in March or April, because they might have their own handful of students. So let's address the first issue at hand, finding professors. India has a limited number of institutes, and it's not that hard to go through all the institute pages and find the professors in your particular field. So I'd like to focus more on how do you go about approaching this issue while finding internships abroad. Now, I think first of all, I'd suggest you to have a general idea of either the institutes or the region you'd like to work in. For instance, in my case, I was very particular about interning in Europe, preferably Germany. So that brought down my search radius significantly. Now, one thing to note here is that while these profs pay you mostly in some or the other, it's very rare that they cover all your expenses. So more often than not, you will end up paying something from your own pocket. So keep that in mind while you're making this decision, because for instance, interning in Europe is far less expensive than doing it in the US. So yeah, you'd like to keep that in mind. Now, okay, so once you've zeroed in on something, you can go through the institute pages and search your preferred departments. Now here I'd like to point out that not every institute has a well-maintained page, and they might not provide details on their faculty members. So yeah, you'll have to literally prof up to find out about them, and it can get very taxing, but I don't see any other way out. Now, alternatively, you can search up conferences that took place recently and go through their lineup to come across profs. I found this process really effective in coming across some very good professors who might not belong to some of the more well-known institutes. Now, one more thing is that it's always nice to establish some sort of a connection with your prof if you can. For instance, if they've visited IISER in the past, or if they're collaborators with the profs in IISER, or if they're collaborators of the profs you worked with. Things like that sort of help, you maintain a more fluid conversation with the professor and might increase your chances of getting a positive reply. Okay. So that's about finding profs. Now, how do you approach these profs? Now, first of all, I'd like to suggest, or rather request you to not send out mass emails. Indian students are in general very notorious for doing this, so please don't add to the bad reputation. In general, addressing them as dear sir or dear ma'am can hint at the possibility of it being a mass mail. So anyway, don't assume genders. It's nice. It's normal to address them using their last name. And be careful not to mess up the mails, and don't send the wrong mails to the wrong people. As it is, the profs are reluctant to open the hordes of project related mails that they get, and just imagine them having to go through. Okay, one second. Okay, I think I'll be switching off my video. Don't send out mass emails, and be respectful when you send your emails to them. Don't send the wrong email to the wrong person or do things like that. So yeah, that's there. But I know it's not possible to curate your every mail depending on the professor. So as pointed out by Anshuman in the previous talk, keep a section and a format that's constant throughout, but always keep customizing parts of it according to the professor. Go through their websites, find out the specific thing that they work on that you're interested in. Some professors have open positions for summer students, so you might definitely want to stress on those particular opportunities. Some profs have a list of projects, like a definitive list of projects on their website, and there are also some rare cases where the prof might ask you to submit reference letters along with your request. So don't miss out on these specifics. Now, going further, you can try to go through their papers, but that's pretty much impossible when you're mailing, say, 100 profs. And no, 100 is not an extreme figure. But yes, if you already have gone through some of their work, discuss that, try to start a conversation on that. And I think if you come across these handful of profs you're really, really interested in, it's good to take out some time and, read some literature. So yeah, that's there. Also, you can approach them for programs like Dart, ThinkSwiss, or Charpak, which require you to get a prof before you apply to the official portal. So you can always approach them saying this, and then you can apply to these programs. And even if you don't get these programs, there's a good chance that the prof might be willing to fund you. So you can also do that. Okay, after that, okay, what do you do to make yourself stand out? So yeah, you'll have to boost your and I know this sounds shallow, and in the long run, it's knowledge and into the subject that's going to count. But then you're in your second or third year and you're using a trainer tutor that only plan. So those changes are going to need some tangible measures to judge you on. And you, first of all, you're far more desirable when you have already worked on something similar in the past. To achieve that, my personal advice would be to do as many projects as you can. Summers, winters, and even semesters. I know it sounds like an overkill, but it pays off. Okay, there are some audio issues. Am I audible? Okay. Am I audible though? Okay. Let's say आपको कुछ CV similar.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm sure you're audible now.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry for that. Yeah, so uh, since when I'm not okay, I'll just get boosting your CV again. So yeah, work on as many projects as you can. And yeah, I'll actually like to elaborate more on this towards the end. So yeah. Also, you might consider wanting to apply for summer schools or conferences and competitions. For instance, I attended a summer school on QCQI at ISI Kolkata before starting my summer project, and I think it was a great experience, especially coming across your peers who are interested in the same field. Uh, Also, speaking for last year, I was aware of Physics of Life summer school at NCBS and another QCQI camp at IISER Kolkata. Right now, I'm not providing you with a definitive list because most of these summer schools aren't annual. You might have to search them up for the particular year and apply for them. Also, while some might cover your expenses, some might not, and you might have to even pay for some. Look up your options, both national and international, and just decide if it's worth your time, effort, money. Okay. Also, attending and participating in the conferences is a great way to not only learn about the field, but I think it's also a good way to form networks, sort of interact with the professors and establish relationships with them, which might help you if you wish to intern with them in the future. Uh, Now, coming to what do you expect from the props? Okay, like what kind of replies and things like that. So, in general, it's polite to wait for 7 to 10 days before sending reminder emails. That is, if you wish to send them. Also, more often than not, you'll not get replies, and more often than not, the replies will be negative. Uh, Sometimes the prof might ask you to apply through an official portal, so definitely do that. Also, don't let this entire process drag you down. It's just very common to start comparing yourself to others around you, and I just think it just ends up creating a very negative environment where people don't like to share opportunities with their peers, or kind of keep things secretive. Don't indulge in them, and that help out others if you can. Uh, I know it's a stressful process, but I think it's far easier to get through it if you're part of an encouraging support. Now, also in my field, like in my experience, some fields tend to have a higher acceptance rate than the others. So yeah, just keep working on approaching more profs. Now, if a prof replies in positive, how do you manage like the finer details of the project, especially funding? Now, for Indian internships, profs really don't pay you, at least not in my experience. And at the most, I think they might provide you some accommodation on campus. So if you're willing to avail that, you should bring that up. For international projects, though, the prof usually help you out in some form or the other, though the degree varies significantly. Now, even if a professor denies you financial aid in the beginning, don't just let them go. Speaking from experience, I had two professors who had denied any sort of financial aid, but I think over further interactions, one of them agreed on providing me with a reasonable stipend, and the other was looking into providing me with hostel campus accommodations. So yeah, the profs can always improvise on your financial aid depending on how your interactions go. Now, obviously at this stage you might want to read up as much as you can on the project, do any sort of rudimentary reading or computational analysis that you can do. And often the prof will redirect you to a postdoc or a PhD who is going to be your point of reference from then on. These people not only help you out with the details of the project, but if you're going out of India, these are the people you approach for other things like issues regarding flights or visas or accommodation, etc. So yeah, try to establish a good connection with these people. Okay, after everything I've said, there's always a chance that the prof might cancel your project at a later stage. Often they'll refer you to one of their colleagues, and sometimes they might just leave you hanging. I have actually experienced both, and hence would advise you to keep your options open and not just turn down a prof as soon as you get affirmation from a more desirable one. That's what I had to say about how you go about mailing profs. And any more questions are obviously welcome. Now, I'd actually like to talk about a couple of more issues that I believe we face in the initial years. The first is, how do your grades affect your internship prospects? Now, if you're aiming for programs, they matter significantly. While some of them are extremely CPI biased, as in they will most likely go to the top CPI holders of your batch, uh, even the other programs, it's recommended to have an 8.5 plus to boost your chances. However, after a point, your research output and experience publications will overshadow your CPI. So it's not the ultimate screening process. Also, if you're mailing profs directly, I really don't think grades play any role at all. So you can go all out there. The second thing is something I hinted on earlier. I suggested you to take up as many projects as you can. But the issue is, what projects do you take up? Though this section is going to be extensively covered by Achuthan, I'd like to add my 2 cents here. Now, if you already know what you're passionate about, that's very good for you. Join a lab, approach a prof, try to start working on building your profile. Well, on the other hand, if you're absolutely clueless like me, uh, start somewhere. Okay, anything that you might find interesting enough to try. Like, spend some time working there, and if you think you love it enough to keep working on it for the next few years, obviously stick to it. But otherwise, switch. Okay, just switch to a different lab, field, subject, whatever. Okay, and I'd really recommend you to explore, as it's not going to be this easy to find this liberty to do so later in your life. And I'm aware of the cons. If you keep switching, you'll obviously take longer to get into the depth of the subject, and hence longer to produce significant results. But I think trying different things can also tune your brain in certain brilliant ways. You develop this inter-subdisciplinary outlook, and you can always try to apply something you learned from, say, field A to field B, thus adding more dimensions to your work. uh, I I think the worst thing you can do here is sort of get carried away in the momentum. Say you worked in a specific field in your first year, and even if you didn't enjoy the work, it's always easier to land a project in a similar field next year. So you just might be tempted to continue working there because switching fields requires more work, and in general, your prospects might not look that great. Uh, you're gonna end up doing research on something you don't even like, and I think that's a very bad situation to get yourself into. uh, so yeah, that's all the suggestions I had. 2 words on the projects I worked on. uh, so I'd specifically like to mention how machine learning helped me out. So I had taken up a project on machine learning from a CS prof in IIT Patna in my second year. And though the project itself didn't have any relation to science, I mean, I had to analyze some tweets to create this summarizer. You can discuss the details with me later if you want to. But yeah, as I said, even though the project didn't have anything to do with science as such, I believe it just gave me an insight into how the entire field works in general. So after that, I've actually been trying to apply it everywhere I go. For instance, in my second summer project, which was mostly theory work on reading up on quantum computation and various algorithms, I was really interested to look into quantum machine learning algorithms. So that's one place I tried to apply it to. The second thing was I had a brief phase where I was doing some gravitational wave data analysis, and the normal process that they use is called match filtering, which for some reason I really didn't find very effective. So I actually tried discussing the possibility of trying to come up with a machine learning algorithm to do that, and I discussed it with the professor in the relevant field, and was shut down very graciously. But yeah, I think you get a point about how working in various fields can actually help you out in some weird ways. Okay. I think that's all I had to say. So I'd like to, I'd like Achuthan to take over from here. Fine.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so hello everyone. This is Achuthan from Department of Biological Sciences. I am in my third year and hopefully I will finish it soon because God knows when the semester is going to end because of the pandemic. So what I'm going to talk about today is the topic of searching for lab groups. So you are in your first year or second year, and this is a talk that is primarily directed at first and second years. And you want to figure out what factors are important in deciding what lab is suitable for you so that you can have a productive experience as a first and second year student. So that is exactly what I'm going to discuss. So being in first year, you essentially have a bunch of interests, or what I would like to call as rudimentary thoughts. And these are things that I have outlined on the left-hand side of the slide here. Now, is there an audio problem? You essentially have a bunch of interests. Yeah. So these are the things that I have outlined on the left-hand side. That is, these are essentially rudimentary thoughts. Should I try this field out? Or I like so and so field. Or I like to work on model organisms. Or I would like to combine mathematics and apply it to chemistry. Combine mathematics and chemistry, so to speak, instead of handling test tubes the way a conventional chemist would handle, is what you would imagine. Or you might possibly want to integrate computation and experimentation together. Now, the arrows represent what the internship is. So these are black arrows which are indicative of black boxes, which are essentially the internships themselves. The idea is that after the internship, you will have a more clear idea of what you're inclined towards, and this is exactly what is indicated on the right-hand side of this slide. That is, you have completed a project in so-and-so field, and this project has given you this following insight that you are interested in so-and-so line of work, or you may want to integrate it with another allied field, for instance, which is essentially the second box here. The third box is something that all of us may probably experience at some point in our academic careers. That is, you don't want to do this kind of work and you want to try something else altogether. So how exactly do you go from here to here? How exactly do you pick out labs, and how exactly do you ensure that you know on what track you're going towards? Now, one important point I'd like to state at the outset is that this is highly subjective and it is highly individual dependent, as you can possibly imagine, because I'm not going to deal with a lot of objective factors here. I'm only going to deal with subjective factors. There aren't going to be numbers anywhere essentially, or any form of other objective quantifiers. So this is highly individual oriented, highly individual specific, and you can clearly see different people in the course of this series and elsewhere provide different advice for the same questions that are essentially asked here. So please keep that in mind as I progress on. Now, what are some important factors in my opinion that need to be considered by a first year student and a second year student? First and foremost is whether you are inclined towards experimentation or computation. Now, IISER 101, a lot of you, it's a polarizing course, I can understand. A lot of you probably hated it. A lot of you probably found it too easy because you've already had some sort of experience in computer science before. The point is that you cannot use IISER 101 as a placeholder for the entirety of computation, nor can you use your experience at IISER 101 to provide a qualitative assessment of how computation is as a whole. All you can probably say from that point is that you can try to see if computation is something that probably suits you at all. That's the only thing in my opinion that you can conclude. And this is exactly what is outlined in the first Venn diagram here. Now the intersection represents the confluence of experimentation and computation, which happens to be something that a lot of people work in, including myself, in that we try to integrate computation into experiments. So that is something that I'll be talking about. Now, since I'm a bio major, I am going to draw some examples from biology. First and foremost, here is an important point. Do not think in terms of fields. Do not think in terms of research fields. Now, a lot of people think that because I do biochemistry, I'm literally in the intersection of biology and chemistry. And as a result, they have a very different idea of what I do than what biochemistry actually is. And this is just one such example. This is just one out of many examples. And the reason why these confusions occur is that students, in particular first and second year students, attach way too much importance to field names, which really shouldn't be the case, because ultimately all that research is about is answering a bunch of questions. It's about creating hypotheses, gathering data, performing some statistical tests, and in the due process, either validating or invalidating the original hypotheses. So research is centered around questions, not fields in particular. Even though the departments are all referred to as departments of biology, department of biochemistry, department of biophysics, or department of, I don't know, some subdivisions in departments of physics and chemistry and so on and so forth. The point is that you have to think in terms of questions. And this becomes especially evident in interdisciplinary research. So if you are, for instance, working in chemical biology, which is a field which essentially looks at the involvement of small molecules in biological systems, is usually present in chemistry departments across various universities. And professors who study chemical biology are usually allied to chemistry departments. And professors who study biophysics usually either come under physics department, mostly 90%, but some of them also spill over into physical chemistry departments or even biology departments. So that is always there. And this is true for biochemistry also. You have lots of biochemistry professors in chemistry department. You also have biochemistry professors in biology department. And these people address their work in very different ways. So it's important for you to understand that thinking in terms of fields is not really something that is going to be of much use. And all these epiphanies will automatically occur to you later on as you progress and trudge through these first 2 years. They'll automatically land on you one by one, but these are just some pointers and hints that I want to give you right away so that they are of use to you and that you don't discover them after, probably doing a wrong step or something like that. Now, the first point is experimentation versus computation. So computation itself is very broad. You can have simulations, you can have data analysis. Anshu has just properly outlined ML and its involvement in physics. Likewise, ML is extensively used in bioinformatics and computational biology. You can have molecular dynamics simulations, which essentially involves using constraints to map out the dynamics of a system in time. So you can have a whole lot of things going on in this broad field of computation. And need I remind all of you that experimentation also is extremely vast, and it encompasses a wide variety of things. That said, since certain people are naturally inclined towards computation, they do tend to pick computation early on, but that doesn't mean that you should exclude computation. The general trend in biology department is that people tend to put away computation until much later in their 5-year journey, and I advise against it. In my opinion, embracing programming and computing in general is something that you can probably do earlier on itself. It's not something that you have to put away for, say, 3rd year or 4th year, especially when you have to take the bioinformatics course, which is a major mandatory course. Because programming is something that is ubiquitous in science, it is something that's here to stay, and it's something that is applicable in a variety of places. So you're probably better served learning programming, some form of programming early on itself. And there are a whole bunch of places online which offer variety of courses at a variety of difficulty levels to cater to a wide variety of needs. Right, so please do take these online courses so you can start learning Python. Python is what I would recommend. It's a general purpose programming language and it is extensively used everywhere. But that said, certain fields and certain problems specifically use some languages. For instance, computational chemistry, from what I have heard, relies a lot on Fortran. So that is something that you probably may require if you are interested in that field. So to gather these specific ideas, you probably have to consult PhDs, BSMS seniors, and most importantly, faculty in the respective fields. Now, the second point that I want to talk about is technique-driven approach taken by some labs versus system-oriented approach. What does this mean? Simply put, technique-driven labs essentially specialize in the deployment of a series of techniques towards the studying of a variety of systems. This is usually the case. For instance, NMR labs make use of NMR to study a variety of systems. That is essentially what structural biologists do. That is, they use things like NMR. Some labs use X-ray crystallography, and some labs, of course, use cryo-electron microscopy to study structures. You also have chemistry labs. For instance, Anshuman Roy Chowdhury sir's lab, and if I'm not mistaken, Sanjay Mandal sir's lab also, which indulge in extensive utilization of X-ray crystallography for their research. So, and physics lab also. Kavita Dorai ma'am specializes in NMR. But of course, all these faculties treat NMR very differently. They essentially approach different flavors of NMR and use it for different purposes. Some faculty are more focused on the development of NMR. Some are focused on, for instance, applying NMR to study some systems. So thinking about these questions will probably provide you some clarity as to what you're probably inclined towards, right? It's not saying that all these are mutually exclusive circles, and that is exactly what I have indicated by the presence of an intersection, right? So there are many labs which start off as system-oriented labs, but they progress into the development of a technique and vice versa. So yeah, I'm just trying to tell you that even though you can reduce the subjectivity in this entire process, you will not be able to get rid of a variety of variables, many of which are far beyond your control. And that's mostly because as first and second year students, you really have limited exposure. So it's only until 3rd year, it's only after 3rd year and beyond, wherein you're exposed to the major specific subjects in your coursework itself, that you obtain a better picture of where you are leading towards. Now, the third Venn diagram that I've outlined here is the intersection of short-term project and long-term stint. What does this mean? Now, one thing that, for instance, Yashrana Bhaiya had said in the previous talk was the same problem of, whether you want to stay in a lab and spend some time there and do some good research there, or you want to have a short-term project and move on and explore and do something else. Now, this is something that you totally have to decide. but each has its own benefits and disadvantages. And since IISER students anyways have winters as well as summers, in my opinion, it is better that you combine at least one winter and one summer and do the same project, or at least deal with the same system. And the reason is because research as a whole is not only about learning what your respective field is all about, but it is also about understanding how to frame questions in that field, how to create experiments, how to design experiments, and how to use those experiments to validate or invalidate your ideas. So it's an entire package deal. It's not just about wading into a field, understanding what the current level of research is, and trying to see where you can put your head in. That's not what research is all about. It's a lot more. It's a lot more essentially. So if you want to get a much bigger flavor of what is going on and look at the big picture, it is highly recommended that you extend your period of internship beyond 3 months. If you are doing computation work, this is much simpler because you can readily take the work back to your institute and work on it in the succeeding semester. But if you are doing experimental work, this is much harder, and you may want to talk to your specific faculty to work out the terms of such an arrangement. Yeah. So, I think I haven't given you examples of system-oriented lab. What do I mean by system-oriented lab? Systems. What do systems refer to? System refers to that which is being studied by the lab in the first place. For instance, I can give you the example of Dr. Shravan Kumar Mishra in biology department. He studies spliceosomes. So spliceosome, and he also studies ubiquitination, which is a post-translational modification. And these are all systems. They are all areas of research with their own sets of questions, which are worth looking into. And that is exactly what system-oriented labs do. But you also have labs which are specialized in dealing with certain constructs, certain model organisms. So these offer an entirely different flavor of research altogether, because these labs have persons who are equipped with dealing with particular organisms or particular protein systems, particular enzymes, and so on and so forth. So, and the same situation applies in physics and chemistry as well. For instance, Dr. Shantanu Kumar Pal sir's lab in chemistry department studies liquid crystals extensively, which means they look at a whole lot of liquid crystal systems, right? But whereas if you're probably going to look at some other lab which focuses on, say, only one protein in particular, then probably they're looking at all aspects of that particular protein. So I'm just trying to contrast different flavors of labs themselves. These are things that you probably may not have looked at in this depth in your first year or second year, which is why I'm giving this talk in particular. Yeah. So this is the action plan that I have in mind. This is my opinion of what a first year and second year can do. It in no way is perfect or infallible, because as I had said earlier multiple times, these are things with so many variables that you cannot possibly constrain them to a satisfiable degree. But this is exactly something that I would outline for your benefit. And the first point is something that I had already mentioned. Jot down your rudimentary thoughts and look into some of the factors that I have outlined earlier to see if they apply to you, if they apply to your field, if they apply to your research question, so on and so forth. Go through faculty pages. First year students usually do their internship at IISER Mohali, although that is not a necessity. Many students do it at their hometowns, or where they are from essentially. So people from Chennai doing it at Chennai itself or something like that. So it's perfectly fine for you to do it at your place itself. Yeah, but IISER is always recommended for one of your earlier projects, not only because you have the faculty in proximity for any doubt clearings or anything of that sort, but you also really do not know how a lab works. You don't know the dynamic of a lab yet. So it would be better that you explore the dynamic of what a lab is and what lab work constitutes by doing an internship at IISER. All I'm saying is that it need not necessarily be your first summer. You can probably take up a semester project in your third semester or fourth semester, or even your second semester maybe, or something like that. So in any case, you have to go through faculty pages in order to try to understand what the faculty is up to. Now, as Anshu had correctly pointed out, some of these pages or many of these pages may in fact be outdated. And the only up-to-date source of information regarding a faculty's work that you can rely on is their publications. That said, it is definitely too much of an expectation to have first-year students go through a whole bunch of papers and try to figure out what these faculties are up to. Instead, a better plan of action would be to consult BSMS seniors who have worked in these respective laboratories. You get to understand what it means for a first or second year intern to work in these labs, because understand that a first and a second year student is after all very different from a PhD student, and therefore obviously what constitutes their work day is something considerably different from what a PhD student or even a master's student or a fourth year or a third year intern would in fact experience. So do not go with sky high expectations that you're going to get quality research done the very first month or the very first internship or whatever it is. For some people it happens, for some people it doesn't. So don't set your expectations sky high for your very first internship, right? Because you're after all just 17 or 18 years old. That said, in order to maximize what you can gain from the internship, the smart move would be to consult seniors, to ask them what their workday was, and above all else ask them if they enjoyed the experience and had a good rapport with the faculty. Having a good rapport with the faculty is important, not only because it acts as a source of motivation in itself, but it also is important for letters of recommendation, which you will most likely require if you will 100% require if you're going to apply for PhD. So it's important to have faculty who have good rapport with students, and unfortunately some faculty do not. And yeah, that's just how it is. So fortunately, I have not encountered a faculty of that nature thus far, but I still ensure that I check with seniors and check with persons who have worked in labs that I am interested in joining, to avoid deal breakers and potentially horrifying experiences. Try to visit the lab often after you have a meeting with the professor. Talk to PhD students. Try to understand what they think of you. Try to understand what they think of their work. Try to understand what work they do, and so on and so forth. I've already discussed the keeping reasonable expectation part. Seventh point is extremely important. Seventh point is very important because oftentimes during internships, it becomes very easy for students to get lost in the nitty-gritty details of what they are up to. This may be because of two particular reasons, I think. Firstly, the work is probably very new, and therefore you really don't know what the field constitutes at that present moment in time in the first place. So you have to read a whole bunch of reviews. You have to see what all has led up to what you're working on. Not everything, but only just sufficient so that you can have a good project experience. The point is that it can be very overwhelming, and it can be very easy to get lost in the nitty-gritty details. So what I would recommend is that you always have the big picture in mind. Remember that you are going to stay in the lab most likely for 3 months at best, unless you are having a long-term stint, even in which case you're going to work there only for 6 or 7 months. And do note that in the period that you're working in after summer, you will also have to balance courses on the side. So definitely it's not going to be very easy. The point is that you will not be able to spend all your time on the internship after the 3 months of summer break. So you need to understand that there are only certain things that are feasible for you to work on, and you need to have reasonable expectations in mind. So I'm backtracking back to the 6th point essentially to show how these 2 points are in fact very much interlinked. So always keep the goals of the internship in mind. This has also been outlined by Yash in his talk about PhD admissions. Do remember that he extensively outlined, and even Misha and Trirupa, about their aspects of about the aspects of SOPs and personal statements and so on. And Anshuman has also said these same things, that you need to have a clear idea of what you want to do, and you also need to have a clear idea of what you have done. This is the only way in which you can convince the university that you're applying to or the organization for which you're applying, to which you're applying for a scholarship, that you are a good fit and that they will be benefited by taking you in. So in order to properly convey your points, you need to have a very clear idea of what you're doing in the first place. And if you get lost in the details, at the end of 3 months, not only will you have a hard time trying to compile a report, but you will also struggle to adequately and succinctly and lucidly summarize what you have really accomplished in the past in the earlier 3 to 4 months. So try to boil it down to simple sentences. And even Richard Feynman had said something along the lines of, you should be able to explain a concept to undergrads, I think, or I think he said high school students, I don't recall. I don't even know if he's the one who has given this quote, but it is usually attributed to him. But the point still remains that the ability to break down complicated concepts and convey it in a succinct manner is an adequate, necessary, and sufficient indicator of your understanding of these concepts themselves. So if you want to convey something if you are able to convey something properly to first year, second year students, third year students, that means you have done a very good job in trying to understand what you have done. So you should be prepared in trying to convey your work to audiences of different levels, be it to professors in interviews, or be it to first years or second year students, be it to a general audience while presenting in a conference, or anything of similar nature. You should be able to scale your work at different levels in order to meet different sets of expectations. Really. So this is a skill that you should develop from first year itself, trying to understand the big picture and trying to understand what your work is really all about and trying to explain it at the end of the day, using as few complicated terms as possible. Now, there are some harsh truths in all of this, some points which which indeed others have outlined, and I thank them for doing so. But I also would like to present a cohesive and cogent set of these thoughts for your reference. Firstly, in all of this, the most important point is that language skills do matter. From sitting down to write a mail to a professor, to having to sit in front of him and give an interview, all the way to speaking in lab meetings and presenting your work, and finally compiling the work down and presenting a report, you need to have a good grasp of English communication, speaking and writing. It is essential. It is absolutely essential, and I don't really have any two ways around it. So please ensure that your communication skills are good and strong, and if otherwise, do develop them from now itself, and do not wait until a later time. Now, this is also applicable for those who are good in English but who tend to speak in an informal tone a lot. So the point I'm trying to convey here is that based on the setting, you will have to manipulate your body language, you will have to change your tone, you'll have to work on a lot of these soft skills essentially. And you don't really want to wait till the internship and then frantically, Google how to write a report, how formal should a report be, or anything of. Please don't do any of that. Start working on these things well in advance, essentially, if you do not have the adequate skills. Secondly, stability and long-term stints are usually what lead to publications. Now, already in previous talks, the point of publication has been thrown around here and there, and indeed, if you have noticed, all speakers thus far and all speakers hereafter, and all of us also, do not really know properly the weightage of publication for PhD applications, do not really know how much it constitutes, because after all, PhD application is highly individual specific, highly application specific. That said, publications do add value, as has been properly described by all the previous speakers, and if you want one, you most likely will have to engage in a long-term stint that is greater than 3 months usual. Most people, at least from what I have corresponded to, have not gotten publications as a result of work that they have done for a period of lesser than 3 months. If this is experimental work, especially experimental biology, then this is most definitely the case, that you will have to work quite a bit for some time a significant portion of time if you want to get a publication. And it is for this reason that I feel that if you want to go beyond the confines of the 3 months and really start to look at your problem in depth, which is what research is all about, by the way. It shouldn't surprise you that being a good researcher means looking at a problem in depth for an extended period of time. So if you want to do that properly, then you are better served clubbing one of your winter periods, that is 1 month, with the subsequent 3-month summer internship in order to have 4 months, or if possible, the semester in between as well, which is around 8 months of work. 8 months is a very, very long period of time. It's still not as long as PhD, but it is certainly long enough period of time to do substantial amount of research that you can present in, say, conferences, or you can present anywhere, or at least you can state with confidence that you have worked on certain questions in depth. You are able to create a cohesive story with not one but more than one question, and you are able to look at a field for an extended period of time. So this is exactly my final point, and indeed it is the bottom line of my talk. So with that, I conclude my session, and I hope you have gained something out of it.
Thank you very much, Achuthan. Anshu, can you hear me? Yeah, Anshu, are you here?
Yeah.
Let's move the question answer session. So first question is from Prajakta. So this question is for both of you. So she wants to know that what is the better way to do a reading project than just reading some material which you don't really know how is going to help. So Anshu, would you first elaborate?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd suggest you to not take a reading project, okay? Because mostly as a first year, what your prof will give you is gonna be something you're gonna cover in your later courses.
Sorry, Anshu.
So
Anshu,
yeah.
can you repeat?
Yeah. So as I was saying, yeah, like try not to take a reading project. Rather, I would suggest you to try working on some computational work to improve your skills, or maybe join an experimental lab to get a flavor. Now, if you are someone who would want to do theory work even in the future, I would actually suggest you to, as a physics person, something I've been through, I would suggest you to take up some math work, because there are going to be a lot of underlying topics and concepts which are not covered in our IISER course. For instance, one issue our batch faced, for instance, was that we never had a formal course on linear algebra. And as someone working on quantum computation, I really wish I did. So yeah, I think it's better to take up some reading project on some of these baser topics rather than going for something very specific. And I think it's a good idea to consult your seniors on what kind of courses are offered throughout IISER, and what are the things that they miss out on which you would want to work on. Yeah.
You want to add something?
Yeah. Try to get some work from home work, which involves something that is more than a reading project, if possible. Because as Anshu has outlined, it's important that you really work on things and do something rather than just confined to reading project. Although considering that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and considering that this is after all your first year internship, the profs may not be willing to provide anything more than reading projects, in which case sharpen skills that require only the use of a computer. That is what I would automatically recommend. For instance, as I had earlier mentioned, learning and becoming proficient in at least one programming language. or as Anshu has mentioned, trying to take some coursework, some mathematics or whatever it may be as needed for your particular subject, and try to become more proficient in that. And this is something that you can get a better picture of by consulting seniors who will be able to tell you exactly for your field, for your set of questions, what sort of extra knowledge do you probably require.
Soumya has a question for Anshu. Which programming language one should excel in data handling? Python, R, Perl, or any other language?
Okay, so I personally have used Python, Mathematica, and MATLAB for my projects. Though working in C is also something that's very common. Though I just feel like these very specific niche programs that are used, these are specific to particular labs or profs you might approach. So it's not. I think the entire prospect of learning a programming language is not to it's not about the different languages that are out there. I think if you have a good grasp on any one of them, I'd recommend Python because you've done it in your first year, so it's going to be easier to move on, to carry it forward. So yeah, just have a good grasp on any one of them, and I think it's comparatively easier to use a different syntax or move on to a different language from then on. So yeah.
So Vasu has a question to Achuthan. Achuthan, how much does the CPI affect a summer application and one's ability to produce good work?
Yeah, so CPI definitely has an impact on the application procedure. And this is something that everyone has outlined thus far. So it has variable impact, and everyone has talked about how different programs have different degrees of impact and so on and so forth. To address your second question, that is its ability to produce good work, I want to make it clear, if it hasn't been made clear to you already, that CPI does not affect your ability to produce good work. Really, CPI stops at the gate being the entrance to the internship. Once you're inside the room, it's all about your knowledge, it's all about your skill, it's all about your dedication, hard work, so on and so forth. CPI stops at the gate. So CPI is only relevant in the application procedure, definitely not at all involved in your ability to produce good work. And this is something that depends on how far you read papers, how much you are able to grasp in the period of 3 months, and how far you are able to meet expectations of your PhD mentor or professor or so on.
So Anshu, Devang has a question for you. You talked about not ditching a professor even if you get a new internship. Does that mean working simultaneously on multiple projects? If yes, then how do you manage it? If no, then how do you say no to the professor?
Okay, so for instance, even this year, I sort of took forward two professors. One of them suggested I apply through Charpa, and I mean, I never got to, but yeah, that was one professor I was moving forward with, and there was another prof in Germany who was ready to give me a stipend. So actually, I never said no to either of them. I just wanted to see how it went. I don't know if that's very ethical, but I just wanted to keep my options open at that point. And for the other profs, I mean, if I wasn't genuinely interested in their work, or if the financial aid they were providing wasn't good enough for me, I just stated the reason and said I won't be able to continue forward with the correspondence. So yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm not sure how ethical this is, but I kept one option open for some time. I think I stopped in around March or something. I told the other prof that I'd rather go to Germany. So yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to be honest with your professor. I don't think they have already invested so much in you at that point that they'll be extremely bummed if you don't go or anything. So yeah, I think it's just fine to just tell them outright.
Can I add a point here if it's all right?
Yeah, actually, go on.
Yeah, so as Anshu had mentioned, honesty is extremely important. So don't try to think, you can fool the professor and try to bluff your way around this, because profs know when you're bluffing. And this is something that the earlier talks have also covered. So don't try bluffing. If you have obtained a better opportunity, tell it to the prof directly and respectfully that you have obtained a better opportunity and you would like to work with work with the prof whom you're mailing to under other circumstances or anything of that sort. So don't work your way around it by coming up with some lame excuses, because they will be able to tell, and that will not look nice. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Achuthan, Tanvi has a question for you. Around what time should you be able to prepare your own project, proposal, design, your own experiments? Consider long sprints.
Good question. So around what time should you be able to, implies that there is some sort of, prerequisites or something of that sort, and that is highly individual specific really, because what is a project proposal? It's essentially a series of questions and series of ways to address the questions, along with a series of hypothetical outcomes for the said experiments. That's all a project proposal is. And you start getting better at doing this as you progress forward. But usually sometime around third year is when you even start considering something like a project proposal, at least in my case and with the case of many biology students, because scholarship programs require you to. So I applied for Corona and I got provisionally selected, and that is something that required the project proposal as one of its requirements. DARD, as has been outlined by Anshuman, requires its own project proposal. So scholarship programs require project proposals mandatorily, but when you're applying to labs, they will essentially ask you for some questions so that you can mutually and informally agree to a project proposal. So that is something that is not mandatory, but it may result based on the particular experience. So you necessarily start preparing sometime around third year. But to gain the skills, I would recommend start from your first year itself, because in effect, it's essentially what I said, nothing more. It's about having questions, specific questions, experiments and outcomes. That's it. And future prospects.
Achuthan, thank you, Anshu. This was a great talk. So that's it. So if any of you have any other questions, you can always reach out to them. You can mail them or WhatsApp them if they prefer. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you all.